fed cattle welfare and transportation. I'm not gonna sit up here and preach to you about you need to use this kind of truck, this kind of trailer, exactly for these kind of cattle. That's not the decision that we want to make in a place like this. There's a lot of different people that have to have input on these decisions, and so we're just going to talk about choices that we've got when it comes to transportation and fed cattle welfare. Okay. So when we talk about animal welfare in the cattle industry, we focused a lot on cull cows, we focused a lot on veal calves, we focused a lot on dairy cows. Have we really focused a lot on the beef cattle? And some would argue that yes, we have, and I think that we have, but I think we can put more focus on beef cattle as well, especially in this transport area. When we look at animal welfare in beef cattle, we see a lot of the feedlot finish versus grass-fed finished argument or debate. We talk about economic sustainability, environmental sustainability, and of course we talk about animal health and its impact on animal welfare. And with the animal health issues, we have BRD, we've got acidosis. Both are caused or can cause stress in these cattle. But how does transport fit in to that animal welfare talk? And again, why do we care? Personally, I care about this because I really have a vested interest in this because my family is very involved. Up here on the left is my little brother. He's 18 months younger than me. And he and his wife have a herd of about 50 commercial crossbred cows. And then on the on the right here is my father. His name's Larry, he's great. He also has about 40 head of cows, and he drove a truck for the state of Kansas for about 25 years. So that's kind of where the cattle meat transport thing comes in for me. And I never ever thought that I would really follow in my dad's footsteps as far as transportation or anything like that, but I found that I have, and I really enjoy it. So that's why I care, and I think that all of us need to have kind of a personal interest in the animal welfare aspect of this to really do a good job. And I think everybody in the room probably has an interest somehow. So when we talk about welfare and transport, what are the big issues that we usually talk about? As far as in those trailers, while those cattle are in the trailers, we look at stocking density. There's some literature out there that says if the stocking density is too low, the cattle tend to lose their balance, tend to fall down. There's also literature out there that says if the stocking density is too high, we can have problems if cattle do lose their balance and fall down and then can't get up because there's just too many cattle in the way. We have some information on airflow, and we actually have a master's student in agricultural engineering that we're working with, looking at different airflow in the different compartments of the trailer, and I think that's going to be an interesting little project that she's going to do, and I think it has an impact on the welfare of cattle in those trailers while they're being transported. And of course, we have bruising. You know, when we talk about transport, we're usually going to talk about bruising. That's what we're going to focus on here. That's what my research is focused on. But again, we do have these other issues that we want to talk about and research in the future when we look at transport. So bruising in fed cattle. Of course, we've got economic implications. It results in trim, loss of yield, and a lot of times these areas where the bruising occurs is along that dorsal midline. And I'll show you some information, some data that we've collected to show that. But that dorsal midline is really where a lot of those more expensive cuts are going to be. So you really lose that trim, but you lose it in areas that are really, really important, right? And then of course we have welfare implications. Usually bruises are caused by trauma. Trauma is probably going to result in bad welfare. So we do have welfare implications with bruising as well. When you look at the prevalence of bruising in the United States, it's kind of all over the board. In 2011, the National Beef Quality Audit reported a 23% prevalence. Our group in 2015 reported a 53.3% prevalence. And then when you look at studies done in other countries, the prevalence ranges a lot more. In 2013, Romero and others reported 37.5% prevalence, and all the way up to 99% prevalence reported in 1996. And one thing to consider when you look at the prevalence in other countries, a lot of the literature a lot of the studies done in other countries were actually done with big groups of cattle that weren't necessarily just fed cattle. They included bulls, they included cull cows, along with calves and fed cattle. So that's one difference that we do have to make when we look at prevalence in the United States versus other countries. And then, what causes these higher prevalences? It's been speculated that, horns cause bruising. Temple talked about cattle temperament causing bruising, and cattle handling techniques, of course, both at the feedlot and at the slaughter facility. But what we want to focus on here today is the transport conditions and the facility design within those transport conditions. There it is. So, the current research that I want to talk about today is a little study that we did to explore the relationship between trauma sustained at unloading and carcass bruise prevalence in finished beef cattle at commercial slaughter facilities. And our objective was to determine whether a relationship exists between trauma incurred at unloading and prevalence of carcass bruising in finished beef cattle at commercial slaughter facilities. And you would think that this is kind of intuitive. Well, of course, trauma causes bruising. But we wanted to explore the strength of that relationship as well. So to reach our objective, we observed whole lots of finished beef cattle at commercial slaughter facilities in July and August of last year. All cattle in each lot were observed by a trained observer during unloading. So we basically got on our little stools and looked inside the truck and observed those cattle coming off and wrote down whether they hit their back, their shoulder, their rib, or their hip. That observer noted every single traumatic event that they saw, and then they subsequently categorized them into those 4 categories. We had a second observer inside the plant who observed the carcasses with the hide off, and they used the Harvest Audit Program to evaluate the carcass bruising that they saw. And the Harvest Audit Program is a scoring system where we divide the carcass into a grid of 9 sections. And so when the observer sees a bruise, say in section 1, they write down on their piece of paper, section 1, they write down the size, small, medium, or large. Small bruises are less than 2 inches in diameter, medium bruises are 2 to 6 inches in diameter, and large bruises are over 6 inches in diameter. And one other thing that we wanted to record was color. Now, in the literature, it's kind of hard to actually determine the relationship of age and color of a bruise. The literature's all over the board, you can't really tell. But the one thing that we did come up with was that bruises that are yellow are probably going to be over 48 hours old because they've already started, the cells have already started breaking those blood cells down. So we used the color as an exclusion factor. Yellow bruises were excluded from the analysis because those bruises were probably not going to be incurred by that trauma that we saw. This is an example of the use of the scoring system. So the picture on the left up here, you can see a bruise in location 9. It's small, and we put no mark for color because it's red, not yellow. On the right, there's a picture of bruises in locations 2 and 5. And of course, those are large bruises, and they're red. So again, no mark for color because we're going to include those in the analysis. So we observed a total of 75 lots, which came out to about 9,800 head of cattle. 9,900 head of cattle. The average traumatic event prevalence by lot was about 20%. However, the carcass bruising prevalence by lot, the average was 68.2%. So almost 70% of carcasses were bruised in one of those locations. When we broke it down by location, we wanted to see whether the bruising prevalence along the dorsal midline was higher than that on the left or the right side. And you can see it was. Over half the bruises that we saw were along that dorsal midline. So again, you've got those economic and the welfare implications here. This is a graph to display the relationship that we found between the traumatic events and the bruising that we saw. So along the x-axis, you have traumatic event prevalence, what we observed as a traumatic event at unloading. And along the y-axis, you have the carcass bruising prevalence. And each of those black dots represents a lot. And of course, the purple line there is our regression line. So we did have a statistically significant relationship between traumatic events and carcass bruising prevalence. However, that relationship was not very strong. We had an R-squared of 0.08. About 8% of the variability in carcass bruising is attributed to by those traumatic events. So I think we have some other areas to explore when we look at traumatic events and carcass bruising. When we broke it down by different locations on the carcass, the traumatic event prevalence and its relationship to bruising on the back. Here again on the x-axis you see the traumatic event prevalence on the back only, and then on the y-axis you have carcass bruise prevalence on the back only. And we see a little bit stronger relationship here with an R-squared of 14, or 0.14. It's about 14% of that variability is due to traumatic events at unloading. However, again, I think we do have some more areas to explore as far as that relationship goes. We broke it down again by shoulder as well. Same setup, traumatic events on the X, bruising on the Y. We did not observe a significant relationship between the traumatic events and the bruising on the shoulder area. And the same with the rib and the hip areas. We did not observe a significant association between the traumatic events and the carcass bruising in the rib and the hip areas. So the conclusions from this study, bruising prevalence is higher than results of other studies in the United States, even studies that our group has done. However, it is lower than results of other countries, but it's really hard to compare those two groups of cattle that were studied in those different studies, or in those different geographical locations. Most bruising did occur along the dorsal midline, and bruises of the medium size, 2 to 6 inches in diameter, were most prevalent. And then we did see a significant correlation between trauma incurred at unloading and carcass bruise prevalence overall and along the back. So where is this trauma coming from? Is it coming from other places during transport? I mean, you see cattle at the feedlot, they're probably not going to have a lot of bruising along the back out in the pens, unless maybe they're buller, something like that. And then at the slaughter facility, their pens are usually set up, you're not going to see a lot of contact between the facility and the animal, especially on that dorsal midline. So where is this coming from? Well, it's got to be coming from some trauma, right? Hoffman and others in 1988 actually defined a bruise as a tissue injury without laceration, usually produced by a blunt object impacting an animal with sufficient force to cause rupture of the vascular supply and the accumulation of blood and serum in the tissues. So they're saying something has to cause this rupture of the vascular supply and the subsequent bruise. So where is the trauma occurring? We've got a lot of speculation. I just want to kind of talk about areas where this trauma can occur and where we want to go as far as looking at the causes of bruising. So we know that carcass bruising is highly prevalent in cattle. 70% of carcasses come in bruised. And some of it does occur during unloading. That's what we saw in the stats that I just showed you. But where else does it occur? The feedlot, the trailer, the slaughter facility, where? And why does it occur? Temple talked about animal handling. We're probably going to see some bruising if somebody's, beating on a cow. We don't want to see that. But it could occur because of that. Increased weights of cattle are probably attributing to this. The picture here shows average carcass weights from the year 2000 to 2014, and they have steadily increased. That means your live weights are going to increase too, right? So, and then of course we want to look at different breeds. Different breeds have different frame sizes. Beef cattle, an Angus steer coming in compared to a Holstein steer, be very different as far as the trauma that they incur at loading, during transport, and at unloading. And of course, we want to look at the design of trailers used to haul fed cattle. They've been the same for a lot of years, and we want to look at different types of trailers as far as their impact on bruising. So one thing that we discovered when we were collecting this data out at the packing plants was it seems a little, well, duh, but it's really not. There's a number of different trailer types, but they can kind of be categorized into two types. Trailers used to haul fat cattle and trailers used to haul both fat and feeder cattle. And feeder cattle are going to be a lot smaller, right? So that's one thing that we really want to explore, and this is where the different options for feedlots, truckers comes in when we look at trailer types. So I'm going to have a lot of rainbow animations, so you're welcome. But it's kind of hard to read, so that's what the animations are for. So this is the area here in the yellow box that we really want to talk about when we talk about bruising. This is where we saw, at least in our study where we saw the most impact between the animals and the trailer, especially coming up out of the belly here, right? And so this is a diagram of the fat feeder combo trailer. These are trailers usually used to haul both fats and feeders. A lot of times they're seen in geographical regions where we have a lot of cow-calf guys, and we have some feedlots here and there. So a lot of these drivers tend to haul both kinds of cattle. One thing that I want to point out, that on all of these trailers, the maximum height is 13 feet 6 inches. Doesn't matter, what state you're in or what kind of cattle you're hauling, it's always going to be 13 feet 6 inches. That's that purple line up there. In these fat feeder combo trailers, they basically have that upper deck, the floor, basically the floor of the upper compartment and the ceiling of that belly compartment. And because of the 16-foot regulations, they have to split that, right? So in the fat feeder combo trailers, they have 69 inches of clearance in that upper deck. In the belly, they've got 66 inches. It's one thing that we want to note when we compare this to the fat trailers. A lot of these fat feeder combo trailers have a dog house or a jail house, basically an extra compartment where they can put calves up in the back so they can really fill it to the max. And they've got this ramp, so the cattle from the upper deck can come down and unload off of this ramp. One thing that we want to note in most of these fat feeder combo trailers, these ramps are slide out. So they slide into that upper deck, and they have to have a bracket right there. They usually slide in on the left. When you're looking in a trailer, they slide in on the left side. So a bracket is set there about a little bit to the left of center, and it's about 2 to 3 inches. And it decreases that clearance that you have coming up out of that belly, that 2 to 3 inches, because they have to have something that holds the ramp up. So all of that contributes to, you basically have about 55 and 5/8 inches clearance for those cattle coming up out of the belly and unloading onto the unloading dock. So basically going up out of the belly and coming into the belly, you have 55 inches of clearance. Now let's compare that to the fat trailers. These are designed, well, mostly specifically to haul fats. And again, we're going to look at this back compartment, right? Or this back area. We still got the 13 feet 6 inches, right? But the space in that trailer, that 13 foot 6 inches, is redistributed. So you actually have 68 inches in that top compartment and 69 inches in that bottom compartment. You still have the ramp, and most of the time it's usually still slide out. So you still have that bracket that eliminates about 2 to 3 inches of clearance. But redistributing that space by basically increasing that space in the belly gives you an extra 2 inches. So the clearance here, right here, is about 57 inches in fat trailers. Now, this is interesting. One thing that basically that clearance could be, you could help that clearance by looking at that slide out ramp. Now, this is a picture here. If you're looking in that trailer and you're looking into the belly, this is the gate into the belly. This is your slide out ramp here. And then that's your bracket that holds your slide out ramp. So you can see, it's about 2 inches that they could potentially have if we eliminated that, right? And in this picture, you can see most of the time when you go in these trailers, that bracket is like the cleanest part of the trailer, because these cattle are going in and they're rubbing it, and they're coming out and they're rubbing it, right? So it's very clean, it's polished, but it's not necessarily a good polish, right? And this is a bruise that I cannot tell you if this animal got this bruise going into a trailer or coming out. I do not know, but it looks very suspicious, right? It's basically linear bruise, doesn't look like a stick from an animal handler or anything like that. Linear bruise that goes along the back, and if you think about it, this animal, if the animal hit that bracket, they would have hit it going in, right? Because it's on that left side of their carcass. Again, it's very suspicious. I cannot tell you if the two are linked, but it looks pretty suspicious. So, what are we going to do about this? How can we increase that clearance? Because we have cattle coming in that are bigger than 57 inches, especially the Holsteins. We've got Holsteins coming in at 60 inches, 61. Some plants are actually turning cattle away that are too big. Most of the time it's because of harvest floor purposes and not, because they're too big for the trucks. But it is something that we need to consider. So, this is a new trailer design. These designs are all done by Wilson Trailer Company. Sorry, I need to give them a plug because they were very gracious to let me use these. But this is a new design designed by Wilson, and it's specific for a certain driver that requested these specifics. Everything that Wilson does can be custom made. And so if a driver comes in and says, I want this and this and this, they're going to do it. And this driver and Wilson work together to design this kind of newer style of trailer. Most of it's the same, but the back end, they made some changes. So again, 13 foot 6 inches, always going to be the same height, unless the regulations change. We've still got the 69 inches and the 68 inches like that previous fat trailer that I talked to you about. However, and sorry, one more thing. He did add a jailhouse to this one so that he could, if need be, he could resell this. We'll talk about that in a bit. We've still got the ramp. However, if you look at the top diagram, that ramp does not slide in. It folds up to the side onto that left-hand side wall of the trailer. So it eliminates that bracket. All you have is a smooth upper deck. They also cut this upper deck back 9 inches, and that gives you a lot more clearance for those cattle coming up out of the belly. And actually, this clearance here is 62 inches, 7 inches more than that fat feeder combo trailer, and 5 inches more than the trailer that they usually use for fats. It gives a lot more clearance, and you get 61-inch Holsteins, they can come up out of here without hitting their backs unless they jump or something. So just to compare, the combo trailers, 66-inch belly height, they've got that slide-in ramp, so you've got a 55-inch clearance coming out of that belly. Those fat trailers, they push that deck up a little bit, 69-inch belly height, slide-in ramps, and you get an extra 2 inches of clearance coming out of that belly. And then these new trailer designs, you see a 68-inch upper deck, which is basically a 69-inch belly height, a fold-up ramp, which eliminates your bracket, and you cut that 9 inches from the upper deck. That gives you 62.5 inches for clearance, which is a lot more than we've seen. Oh, and this is a picture of that brand new trailer, the new design. Wilson let us go in and see it, and it was kind of cool. And I've never been in an actual clean new trailer, so that was fun.
Looks like they changed the ramp so it goes down the center too, instead of being off one side.
So most of the ramps that I saw, and this is just in my project, the ramps did go down in the center. I think a lot of it is that bracket kind of throws you off because the ramp is over here on the left side. Most of them go down in the center, but I think that bracket kind of throws you off because it's off center a little bit. Now some trailers do have where they come up on either side, but yeah, and I think a lot of it is, that's just a lot of room. That's awesome, I walked down there and I was like, I don't really even have to bend over. I usually don't have to bend over anyways because I'm short, but so anyway. So what do we want to do with these new trailer designs, We'd really like to look at the other areas of the transport process at the feed yard, and of course these new trailer designs. But, along with the trailer designs, we don't want to forget about everything else that can contribute to bruising as well, such as sex, breed, carcass weight. We do want to explore those areas as well. So I think there's a lot of things that we do need to look at. Trailer design is just one of them. But design experiments, especially with trailer type, they are possible. We'd like to compare these fat and combo trailers and maybe include the new design. We have some projects set for this summer, and hopefully we'll have a little bit more of a concrete answer as far as, what trucks and trailers are best for these different types of cattle. Again, they're not all, it's not going to be just, hey, you need to drive this kind of trailer because that's what kind of cattle we have. You know, a lot of the decision is made by the trucker himself. These trailers, they want to haul what they want to haul. If they want to haul fats and feeders, they probably should get a trailer that's tailored to them. But it will help us to kind of make suggestions and see, okay, well, you're going to do this, maybe we could suggest this. So, bruising is an industry-wide issue. We'll face further scrutiny in the area. I mean, if it's welfare-oriented, we're going to face some scrutiny. It's just the way it is. But we're going to face it head-on. It's going to be fine. We're going to do research, and the biggest thing is collaboration between feed yards, truckers, and the packing plants. We all have to cooperate. And honestly, when I was out doing the research last year, it was amazing how many people really wanted to contribute, especially the drivers. They're like, yeah, what can we do? Do you want to come in? Do you want to take pictures of our trucks? What do you want to do? I mean, they were great. So I think that these experiments are definitely possible, and moving forward in this area is definitely possible as well. So with that, I would really like to thank everyone that helped me with this project, everybody at K-State, and especially the grad students that had to endure basically whole shifts of killing cattle. I really feel bad about that, but it was good work. Cargill Meat Solutions, of course, I really appreciate their help with everything, and Wilson Trailer Company for providing these designs and really helping us to learn a lot more about these trailers that, you know, a lot of people don't get that opportunity. So I really, really appreciate Cargill and Wilson helping me to have that opportunity. So with that, I'll take questions. I don't know how to do that. Nope. Oh, Kelly's got one. Got one over here too.
Okay, I was just wondering if you've ever, if you know of any work or if you've ever tried putting pressure sensors on, there's those really fine ones that they are using in laying hens to look at impact to assess keel bone deviations and fractures. I was just curious if you know of anybody or if you've tried looking.
We have not. I think that'd be really interesting. I know that they've done some work with pressure sensors on chutes, but we have not done it in trucks. Well, the one thing that we had kind of talked about was maybe putting GoPros and looking in, having that help us look in, especially at loading, because obviously if they're going up that ramp, you're probably not going to be able to see into that truck. But that's a very good idea and something that we should probably look into.
Yeah, it's just, I think the technology's changed, so they're small enough that it wouldn't affect the measurement.
I mean, you
itself.
put one of those on that little bracket, I think we could get some pretty good stuff.
It would be
Yeah.
cool.
Thank you.
Question from the online viewers. Is it possible to retrofit the trailers with the bracket ramps to the left side ramps?
That's actually kind of where a lot of these conversations started with some of the packing companies, especially, and with the trailer companies and the packing companies, especially Cargill. We're really trying to work forward with this, and that was definitely an option. I'm not sure exactly how the logistics of that would work because, you know, the driver would have something to do with it and, you know, probably have to contribute monetarily or something. It's going to cost a little bit of money, but those conversations are being had. We're just not quite there yet. No? Good. All right. Well, thank you very much.